welcome to Sinister Studies. Join me each episode as I delve into some truly sinister topics and traumatize my family. I'll be joined by one or more teenager, and from time to time, we'll have special guests. Be forewarned, our stories are seriously sinister, so listener discretion is always advised.
You want to sit in the chair?
There you go.
You want to chill?
She does want to.
Oh, she's so neat. So cute. Piper, you're so cute. You know that. You're well aware. But I feel the need to inform you anyway. Because it's true. Look at your dumb little face. Look at your dumb little face.
That was disgusting. Do you want to sit in?
I sit down there. You want it?
He hasn't moved from his chair. That's his office chair. Sebastian's office chair.
Kitty wants to make Kitty's part of the conversation now. Oh. Piper has insisted that she's part of the conversation.
Piper's sitting in for today.
Yeah.
It's official.
Sub's also in the area, but he doesn't seem all invested.
No, he's just happy he's got his little office chair.
He's invested in being a silly little guy, and that's about it. Piper means she'll get attention.
All right, so welcome back to Sinister Studies. We are on part 3 of the Lizzie Borden trilogy. Lizzie had been indicted for the murder of Andrew and his wife. I'm having a
Oh.
Andrew and Abby.
Abby, oh yeah.
Borden.
I was gonna say Abby.
With this new indictment came new attorneys. Defense would hire a new lead attorney. He was hired for $25,000. And his name was George Dexter Robinson, who once had been governor of Massachusetts and had also appointed one of the judges. Prosecution also appointed a new lawyer, William Henry Moody. He was a Harvard graduate and had been an Essex County District Attorney, become Secretary of the Navy, and a U.S. Supreme Court judge. So nothing but heavy hitters for the Borden trial. Piper, we're not doing this the whole time.
Oh my god, she's being so clingy. Oh, she's so cute though.
It was suspected that the prosecution brought on a new prosecuting attorney because backlash with religious conservatives, women's rights advocates, the death penalty for her crimes. The district attorney received hate mail. So I'm sure he was expecting it to only get worse, especially now that the death penalty is on the table. And Lizzie had begun to get more and more support across the board, and people were coming out publicly to support her. Reportedly thought that her case was a lost cause because there really wasn't that much evidence, and she would probably end up being not guilty. But they didn't feel that they should back off of the trial either. It set a bad precedent. So Lizzie's trial would be set to begin in the summer. She would write letters to friends and family, and the letters basically showed a definite mental decline and loss of hope.
Well, yeah. It makes sense. Checks out.
3. As a fun side note, a 12-year-old returned home to find his 22-year-old sister on the kitchen floor covered in blood. So much blood, in fact, that it leaked through the floor and into the cellar.
Fun.
Her body was extremely mangled, and the papers immediately compared it to the Borden murders, But officials declined to say that they could be connected because
Could they really?
a watch and money were stolen from the scene of this crime. And it also looked like it may have been a failed rape. The victim had fought hard. A Portuguese immigrant, Jose Correa,
Portuguese.
initially pled not guilty, but later pled to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life. He was pardoned 20 years later and sent back to the Azores. So, brutal murders were still happening while let's see. You can't talk.
Wow,
It's been a day. Okay. Brutal murders were still happening while Lizzie was behind bars. I have to say, there was so much interest in the coming trial that they ended up giving tickets to reporters to enter the courtroom. During jury selection, 150 men were called, were farmers, various other professions. You had 5 farmers, a cabinet maker, an iron worker, a painter, a manufacturer, a jeweler, and a real estate agent. Honed in on their motives, the salty feelings that Lizzie had in regards to her stepmother prior to the procedure. I'm still in work mode. Clearly, first Jizzy, now procedures. To say. It did bring in the fact that Lizzie tried to buy prussic acid and had burned a dress. He went on for hours in his opening statement. It was over 90 degrees in the courtroom.
Ugh.
And everybody thought that Lizzie had fallen asleep at one point, but it turns out that she had just passed out, and nobody had really noticed until she started to turn purple.
Oh.
And frankly, that was what was expected of her as a woman standing trial. Defense pointed out that there were places that a murderer could absolutely hide in the Borden household and not be seen by Bridget or Lizzie in the process. Time everybody got up, what everybody had eaten. For reference, this sounds vile, but the Borden's last meal pertained of cold boiled mutton, warmed mutton broth. Why we couldn't warm mutton along with the broth, I don't know. Johnny cakes, sugar cookies, bread and butter,
Sugar
bananas,
part of the
and
meal?
pears, along with coffee. Yes, they had all of these things.
First of all, that's a lot. Second of all, together, all of them together. Also, that's a really shitty last meal.
It is a really shitty last meal.
Like, I feel bad for them on that.
The testimony that she had given during the inquest in regards to where she had been, where Lizzie had been, door being locked, from Bridget. Her friend Alice would also be called to the stand, and she would testify about seeing Lizzie tearing up a soiled blue dress. But she did say that she never actually saw it burned. Prosecutors would say that she hid the dress for evidence during all the searches after changing out of it after the murders, at which point she then tore it up in front of her friend and later burned it in front of the cops who had been standing guard, which is kind of a conflicting statement.
Yeah.
Witness descriptions of Lizzie's dress the day of the murders describe it as some variation of blue, but the style and material would vary widely. We have discovered from our New friend Karen C. that blue was Lizzie's favorite color, so most of her clothes were blue. So for people to say that she was wearing a blue dress was not a wild stab in the dark.
Didn't narrow it down much, presumably.
Defense would tear up the officers on the stand, bringing to light that they really did a cursory search of the house and didn't notice things such as the dresses because they were looking for weapons and blood. They were also forced to admit that they didn't take notice of most of the dresses in the house in general, and they didn't remember what Lizzie was wearing at any point during the day. Nobody made note of it until she changed into that wrap dress. And the defense was so good that all of the testimony was basically prosecution putting a witness on the stand, and then the defense attorney tearing their testimony down, forcing them to go back on whatever they said. Details in a life or death trial are going to matter. The police said that they'd found the handleless axe the day of the murders, but then put it back where they found it and left it to be said. No. The police had said that they had found the handleless axe the day of the murders. Then they put it back where they found it, and they didn't come back to collect it for another day or so. However, they don't know where the axe is now. The handle of the axe were in possession, but it would never be confirmed, and as a result, the Fall River Police Department was crucified with the press. The justices had to decide whether or not Lizzie's inquest testimony could be used at the trial. The jury were excused during this argument, and the defense and prosecution had it out. The gist of the situation is, did Lizzie testify willingly? Prosecution said yes. Defense said absolutely not. She wasn't aware that the police were sitting on a warrant before her, or she wasn't aware that the police were sitting on a warrant for her arrest. She had been surrounded by police for days prior to the inquest. She was not allowed a lawyer at the inquest, and she wasn't informed of her right not to testify. And once her testimony had been complete, she was then held until they had gotten yet another warrant, which would be the final official warrant for her arrest.
Also, she was drugged up.
There's that too. Prosecution admitted that it was a hell of an argument. They say they summoned Lizzie and she appeared. They said her lawyer wasn't there because it was within the court's rights to decline the request to have a lawyer present. And that she wasn't told that she didn't have to testify, and their excuse was that she had spoken to her lawyer beforehand and he should have told her that she didn't have to testify. Plus, they said that the police were really in the Borden home prior to the inquest to observe everybody, not just Lizzie. Even though they basically had come right out and said that Lizzie was the prime suspect. And in the end, the justices deliberated that based on the facts, Lizzie was already in custody and unbeknownst to her. So they basically, the justices ruled that based on the facts, they felt that Lizzie had already been taken into custody without being told she was in custody.
I mean, essentially, right?
And her testimony would be excluded from evidence. And that news brought Lizzie to tears. As the trial wore on, it became more gruesome. They submitted bloody evidence. There was a demonstration. of the likely blows to the victims' heads. They used plaster casts of heads to do this. Jurors, spectators, and Lizzie were all traumatized by the evidence that they were offering up. And Lizzie always seemed quite faint. Like she was just on the edge of just completely losing consciousness. The coroner would testify that someone's trying to get the fuck out of here. The coroner testified that a, quote, woman of ordinary strength could have done damage like this with a sharp weapon with a handle. And the murderer could have been standing over and astride Mrs. Borden when she was murdered. And the defense pointed out glaringly... What? What are you doing?
She's just sitting there growling.
The defense would point out to this point that women didn't even ride horses astride at this point. There was no way an upper-class woman, or any woman for that fact, would stand astride a person in this manner.
Oh,
Hey, let him be. She's like, no, come out. Get out of here. Oh my god, this ridiculous ass
dog.
The answer is that Mrs. Borden was killed from above and behind. They could not determine which, if any, of the hatchets on the property were actually the murder weapon. The medical examiner would testify that given the wounds, he could narrow down given the wounds on Mr. Borden, he could narrow down the weapon, which is when the prosecution pulled out his fucking skull to help him prove his point. The judges allowed Lizzie to leave the room for this fiasco, which seems like it would be a lot. Like, it was actually Andrew Borden's head they pulled out and, like, took a hatchet and, like, fit it in the holes in his head.
Yeah, that's traumatizing, to say the least.
The medical examiner said that the weapon was probably about a 3.5-inch hatchet, which is about the length of the hatchet that they had in the Borden house. He said he measured the wounds and the hatchet that the police collected at the scene, and everything seemed to fit okay. But when he tried to use the hatchet in court, the blade didn't fit into the holes at all. They had tested the hatchet thoroughly, and the hatchet was not covered in blood or human hair at all. They were eventually forced to admit that it was nearly impossible to clean blood off the rusty hatchet. Because rust is porous. Defense were able to successfully argue against the druggist taking the stand to identify Lizzie as the person who tried to purchase the prussic acid prior to the murder, because the murder weapon was an axe and not poison. But also, even if she had tried to buy it, it could have been to kill pests, which is what prussic acid was commonly used for during the day. And 3, she had no prior actions or history that would make people think she was trying to hurt anything.
Other than bugs.
Piper, are you guys done? Prosecution. By day 10, prosecution, who was really leaning heavily on the testimony of people versus the actual evidence were forced to rest at this point. So defense would start their case. The defense did what they could to move the trial along as fast as possible. They didn't have anybody testify for hours. They were cracking jokes. They were laughing. They were trying to make it so nobody beat the dog. Attorney Jennings told the jury about his long history with the Borden family. He told them that Lizzie had lived an honorable life, and told them about her volunteer hours and how she frequently did good deeds. The only thing more insane to him than the murders themselves was that a woman was being accused of them, and that woman was Lizzie. He reminded the jury that they weren't there to solve the crime. They were there to decide whether or not the circumstantial case prosecution had laid out was accurate and that there was no doubt that she had committed the murders. He pointed out that somebody could have fled the home and not be noticed very easily. He pointed out that nobody on the street had seen Andrew return to the home that day. So it's not like people were watching the streets. They did not have a neighborhood watch going on. So somebody could have easily fled the scene. They also discussed how strange men had been seen near the Borden house in the days prior to the murders, and about how there were 3 separate reports of suspicious activity in the area. They went so far as to put a family member of Andrew's on the stand to say how easy it was for him to actually open the door while it was locked. He was able to jimmy the spring lock because the door did not properly engage unless the door was slammed shut. So it's like your brother's room. His door is not properly closed unless it's slammed.
Apparently. Or more accurately, my door.
Yeah.
I just kind of wedge it in there when it gets humid.
That's all you can do at that point.
Like, I could probably, if I tried hard enough and had the AC on, fully close it. But, like, that's enough. That's enough. I don't have time for all that.
They went so far as to put the ice cream man on the stand.
The ice cream man?
I will tell you how perceptive this ice cream man is because our ice cream man just fucking blows down the street. He would never know who lives where or never mind who looks like what. The ice cream man testified that he saw a woman with a dark dress leaving the barn and entering the house that morning. He said that the maid was not the same woman that he saw coming from the barn. He knew this for a fact because he drove by their home frequently and also delivered ice cream to the home. They put a boy on the stand who said that in the past he had snuck into the barn and that it was in fact cooler in the barn than it had been outside. So for them to say that the barn would have been sweltering was a bit exaggerated. His testimony would also discount the testimony of officers because he had been in the barn between the time that Lizzie had left the barn and the officers went in the barn to search it. He said that when he went in, they actually saw the first officers arrive on scene. There was also a reporter that had gone into the barn as well before the officers had searched the barn. So if there was a layer of dust on the floor of the barn, a little boy had been in there.
How was there a layer of dust?
A reporter had been in there. How were there not footprints or some sort of disturbance in the dust on the barn?
No, like, somebody's gotta be lying. Also, why was there just this random kid, like, breaking into their barn?
Well, if it's cooler in there. And they probably had a lot of, like, all their, like, junk was in the barn, kind of like our garage. You just put all this stuff in there.
Not a lot for a kid to do back then. Like, what are you gonna fucking do?
As an aside, on June 15th, a neighbor's son was on their roof, because children belong on roofs, looking for his lost ball. On the roof, he found a hatchet.
Oh.
It was quite rusted, but clearly new. You could see the gilt edging underneath, which meant it was new. It would have worn off eventually. It was found to be so important that in 1989, the Historical Society received the DA's notes on the case. A note from the medical examiner said that in one of the cuts on Mrs. Borden, there were small deposits of gilt material, which is used to ornament hatches when they leave the factory. So the murder weapon was new.
Gee.
For some reason, nobody thought anything about this discovery at the time, and the information was never presented to the court. Emma would testify on the defense's behalf, saying that she had been the one to tell Lizzie that she should just go ahead and destroy that old dress. She would tell them that Lizzie and Mr. Borden had a great relationship. In fact, the only jewelry that Mr. Borden wore was a ring that she'd given him, and he was buried with it. He didn't even wear a wedding ring.
Damn.
Emma was stoic on the stand. When she was cross-examined, she just sat straight. She never backed down. The DA couldn't break her. And it was time for closing arguments. Defense would tell the jurors that they needed to forget all the speculation, rumors, and hearsay that they might have heard leading up to the case. They shouldn't judge Lizzie based on her emotions at the time of the murder, or ever, for that matter.
Because she was traumatized.
Prosecution would say that the circumstantial evidence can be almost as strong as hard physical evidence. The judge gave Lizzie the opportunity to speak to the jury. And she kept it simple. She just looked at the jury and said, "I am innocent. I leave it to my counsel to speak for me."
Oh, shit.
And the jury was given their orders at 3:24 p.m., and they left to deliberate. While waiting on the jury, a box was delivered to the courthouse for Lizzie. Somebody had sent her flowers, and she was very clearly pleased that somebody would think about her during this time. And about an hour later, the courthouse started to fill back up again, because the verdict was in. Not guilty.
Yippee.
When she heard the news, Lizzie collapsed on the court railing, and she openly wept in front of the whole court.
I'd weep too. Goddamn. Meow.
Apparently, reportedly, both the judge and the bailiff were teary-eyed as well.
As well.
The crowd was excited and cheering for like 10 minutes. It was a circus. The judge would shake Lizzie's hand, thank all of the jurors personally. And she obviously wanted to go home immediately. Unfortunately, she didn't realize that 3 out of 4 people in the city of Fall River thought she was guilty. Instead of going to the Borden house directly, she would go to a friend's house. When she finally did return home, it was crazy. Neighbors called the press if she could be seen in the house. Crowds would wait outside to just catch a glimpse of her. I'm sure she had to keep her curtains closed at all times.
Sounds terrible.
They reported that Lizzie had not attended church on her first week back at home.
Oh, God forbid. Like, you wouldn't want to attend church either if there were a fuck ton of people there, if a majority of the people there thought you killed your parents.
Very true. It turns out she had, in fact, been in Newport to, like, recenter and find herself after the trial. So she went to church in Newport at the time. They reported that a Lizzie doppelganger had been seen in Boston. The press,
Lizzie doppelganger.
yes, a Lizzie doppelganger. They reported that she was going back to jail when she was seen getting on a train to Taunton one time. Lizzie couldn't go shopping. She couldn't go to the store. She had to leave town to do any of these things. But when she finally did return to church, she sat in her family's designated pew. The pews were paid for and passed down by generations of families. All of the families around her just got up and sat elsewhere in the church.
Damn, that's crazy.
Her friends eventually would stop visiting her because they had begun being snubbed and avoided by the high society folk. The police would drop the investigation into the Borden murders completely, leading to the discussion of a not guilty verdict versus being actually innocent. So they were still debating on whether or not she was guilty. Ugh. In possibly an attempt to save face, the DA would go on to publish Lizzie's inquest testimony, which further fueled all the speculation. Damn it, why'd you have to yawn?
I'm sorry.
Lizzie and Emma would go out of their way to give Mrs. Borden's sister her money and property deeds when they really didn't have to. Because Mrs. Borden died first, all of her assets became Andrew's, and then when Andrew died, all of his assets then went to his daughters. But the sisters gave all of Mrs. Borden's property and possessions to her surviving sisters. They would petition to have Andrew and Mrs. Borden's skulls returned so that they could be buried. They would eventually secure their return. They did not bury them in the casket with their bodies. They would put them in a box and bury them above the casket at the burial site.
That's actually insane.
It is insane. It's like, what are you doing? Burying vampires? Like, that's... Well, you got... I don't... The fact that they took the heads.
Like, the fact that they were separated in the first place is crazy. Not even with the just, like, ugh. I'd be so mad. She buried me without my beautiful face. That would be so mean.
I will not behead you.
I sure hope not.
Lizzie and Emma would eventually move to the trendier area of Fall River, which was deemed the Hill. They purchased a house, which Lizzie would name Maplecroft. They had a large staff and all the modern comforts that they would ever desire. Lizzie would eventually begin going by the name Lisbeth, but that really didn't help her with her social standing in Fall River. Newspapers still printed stories, most of which insinuated that she got away with murder. Children threw rocks at their house and taunted her whenever they could, hence the nursery rhyme. Didn't need me to play it again.
I got it. I know it. I've been knowing it for years.
I'm so glad.
I wasn't chanting that on the playground, but I've known it.
I probably would have gotten a call if you started chanting that on the playground.
No, what was the other one? The wing around the rosy or whatever.
Yes. I mean, that one's morbid as hell, too.
Yeah, they all are.
In 1897, Lizzie was involved in a scandal where it was rumored. In 1897, Lizzie was involved in a scandal where it was rumored that she'd stolen 2 paintings from a store in Rhode Island. She was never charged with the crimes. The store said they had no record of Lizzie ever being in their store. Bolstered rumors that Lizzie was secretly a klepto and that Andrew had paid off the shopkeepers in Fall River for her entire life to keep it quiet. However, from everything we know about Andrew, that doesn't really seem likely, as it would have gotten out way before her mid-30s. Like, a wealthy klepto, that would have gotten out in some way. Somebody other than somebody being paid off would have seen it.
Yeah. Presumably.
And Lizzie would find that she was quite fond of the theater. She started going to shows in Boston and New York. She became a super fan of actress Nance O'Neill and started hosting parties for her and her theater friends at Maplecroft. Rumors swirled because theater people were not much better than street hustlers at that time. People did say that Nance was likely using Lizzie for her inheritance and for her own personal gain due to her notoriety. There were rumors that they were having an affair. I don't feel like that's relevant. It seems stupid.
Gay icon Lizzie.
The shenanigans with the theater folk seemed to bother Emma because she was not a party person. After speaking with her pastor about the goings-on in her house, he had advised her to move out of Maplecroft. Emma did, and really never spoke about it. She did one interview after leaving Maplecroft where she maintained that Lizzie was innocent and could never have committed the murders. When asked about moving out, she said, the happenings at the French Street house that called me to leave, I must refuse to talk about. I did not go until conditions became absolutely unbearable.
That's crazy.
So some shit went down in the house. We're not sure what, but it was bad enough for her to leave. After Emma moved out, as far as anyone is aware, she never spoke to Lizzie again. Lizzie would die on June 1927 at 66 years old. Emma died within days of Lizzie's death. Both were buried with their father and their stepmother. Lizzie had not only left her mark on history, but she was also remembered for her charitable work as well. Of her money went to the Fall River Animal Rescue League, which she had helped form. She left them $30,000, which would be over $542,000 today. She had taught immigrants to help them be better prepared for school and jobs. She was the secretary-treasurer of the Christian Endeavor Society, which would fund books and programs to help with literacy for the poor. And she was part of the Christian Temperance Union, which supported prohibition, protecting women's rights, and aiding immigrants. To this day, the Borden murders.
Piper! Girl! We're trying to wrap up in here. Come on! Bitch!
I think she got the point. To this day, the Borden murders have never been solved. But as we saw, the mystery is still very alive in Fall River. Are you guys done? Thank you. Hey, pretty girl. Piper!
Piper, I didn't even see what you just did, but I know what you just did.
By that traumatized look on my face. Oh, fucking disgusting dog.
Nuh-uh, don't bring that mouse near me.
So yeah, the Lizzie Borden series was sponsored by Dad. We got to go to the Lizzie Borden house. Brought home a magnet. Brought home a cool shirt. Not brought home any ghosts.
I mean, at least I don't think so.
Probably not.
We already have our ghosts.
I don't think they'd want any more.
Yeah. Also, why would they come home? They have a beautiful house.
They do have a beautiful house, and they have many visitors.
Yeah. Sure, it's much more fun over there than it is here.
And they're ghost children. I don't want ghost children here.
Why are there ghost children? That's why.
They said on the tour that they felt that it was so before.
Oh, so why did the ghost kid have a tarot card?
I don't know. Apparently, the relatives of the Bordens were also the Bordens, lived next door. And the mother killed her children, and then the father came home and may or may not have slashed her throat open. So they all died. The father was never prosecuted, but the children died, and it is rumored that the small children inhabit the attic at the Borden house.
But
so
why wouldn't they haunt their own house?
People leave them toys.
Someone left them a single tarot card.
That's a big hard no for me.
Just one tarot card. Like, what the fuck's a kid gonna do with one tarot card?
Which one was it again?
The Star.
Yeah.
Rider-Waite tarot deck. The Star. What the fuck is a kid gonna do with that?
Fuck is this?
Fuck is what?
So, I am the only one at work who's not afraid of gross things. I don't do poop. I draw the line at poop. But I am the only person at work that will catch or kill spiders.
Hold up.
I am the Hyper! Until Mr. Sebastian got here, I was the godfather of mice murder.
The godfather of mice murder.
She just sent me a picture of, probably wasn't a rabbit. That does look like a spine.
A spine?
A picture with a text that says, I'm thinking this used to be a rabbit. Now, how the fuck am I supposed to pick that up?
Is it just...
It definitely was a rabbit.
How do you know?
Look at the spine. It's little. And curved like a rabbit's.
Oh, wait.
So yes, these are weird things that are asked of me.
They want you to get it?
I think that's the weirdest thing that they've ever sent me, though.
They want you to get it?
No, they want to know how to pick it up.
They're asking for your advice.
Yeah, it had a whole setup. And I'm pretty sure That family that was on the tour with us was staying up there too, because there was a cot in that room.
Didn't even give them a whole deck. Like, what do they got to do with one card? First of all, second of all, I don't think like what would they? They're not gonna do the ghosts are gonna give people tarot card readings. Like what?
No, I guarantee you, somebody went upstairs and did tarot card readings in the house.
How do you know?
Because why would you just bring one single tarot card?
Yeah, no.
To the
Somebody
house?
probably bought a whole deck, presumably.
I would. Yes, you're not gonna just leave an arbitrary card.
But why would they leave the card anyway? Like,
The children might want the tarot card.
Maybe. I don't know. You're like, whoa, she's pouring water.
Our tale on Lizzie Borden. A horrific, yet still unsolved murder.
Yippee.
Yes. On Instagram, Facebook.
Here, even subscribe also, potentially.
Tell your friends.
Yeah. Do whatever it is. On the platform. Rate us. Whatever the fuck it is on your platform. I don't know what you're listening to this on. Email. I have an email.
SinisterStudiesPod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Adios.